what's going on, Time Planet? It's your boy King Time X here, back with another video, and you guys already know the deal. This is going to be what if Yuji, interestingly enough, was a wielder of the Renegon, or what if Yuji had the Renegon. This is going to be the first time I do a Jujutsu Kaisen what if, so wish me luck, y'all. Hopefully it comes out good. Yuji Itadori was a peculiar kid. He was born a bit different from the others. For some reason, he had a strange pair of purple eyes with several rings within said eyes. It creeped out quite a few of the kids throughout the years. Many of them would make rude comments about his eyes. Some honestly found it to be rather creepy enough to the point that they would try to avoid him like he was the plague. They would try to even make him feel ashamed of his eyes, while others throughout the years they would try to make him feel more ashamed of his eyes rather than actually fearing it. His grandfather was there for him though throughout these times. He was always there to encourage him to keep his head up in these sort of situations, because many people would try to put him down for his unique eyes. But the way his grandfather would tell Yuji to see his eyes would be simply this: that he was blessed with a special pair of eyes. Sure, Yuji was different, but that was okay. As a matter of fact, since Yuji was blessed with these special pair of eyes, there was probably a bigger purpose to these eyes later on in the future, besides, well, having an unusual look. This comment from his grandfather throughout the years would honestly motivate Yuji. Though the negative comments about his eyes never really stopped, Yuji decided to not let these words faze him as much. He would keep his grandfather's words in his mind whenever people tried to make him feel ashamed of his eyes. The older that Yuji got, the more he noticed things that others didn't seem to notice as well though. Could this be one of the special properties of his eyes? He wasn't all that sure. But it started off as this. At first, he would just see these strange creatures in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and he just thought that it was his overactive imagination running wild. But by the time he became a teenager, he was still noticing these strange creatures in certain areas. He didn't really know why. He also questioned why no one else was able to see the same things as him though, because at this point it wasn't just his imagination anymore, or at least he hoped it wasn't his imagination. He didn't want to believe that he was going crazy. But another thing ended up happening. The scientist's curiosity of his eyes growing by the day, Yuji's grandfather was getting weaker by the day, to the point that when Yuji was around the age of 14 years old, his grandfather became so ill that he was forced to be admitted into a hospital. Yuji would do his best in order to visit his grandfather every day around 6 p.m, at least on school days. When it came on to the weekends, that was essentially where he was the whole time, just trying to spend time with his grandfather. But the old man would try to push his grandson away each and every time. He would comment on how he should spend his time making friends instead. Yuji insisted though on staying with his grandfather until his grandfather's words eventually got to him. He eventually decided to take the time out to make a couple of friends at school. He became friends with a couple of kids and even joined their club as well. But he would still do his best to make time for his grandfather. One night though, Yuji would come to visit his grandfather, and although he at first thought the old man was asleep, he would notice something. He noticed that his heart monitor, it had gone flat. His only family, they just died. They just died this very night, and Yuji, he would be distraught for understandable reasons. This guy was his only family. This was a man that raised him since he was, well, for basically as long as he could remember. Practically his whole entire childhood was more so focused around his grandfather raising him. He didn't even know his parents were crying out loud, although sometimes his grandfather would try to bring up his parents, but Yuji, he did not really care to know about them. As far as he was concerned, there was nobody else but his grandfather, which made it hurt even more when realizing that he was dead. The nurses, they would escort his grandfather's body out to the room not too long later, and the boy, he would just try to fill out some paperwork and take the time out to grieve. Unfortunately, he would not get such an opportunity. You see, a black-haired boy would actually make his way into the hospital and introduce himself to Itadori. His name was apparently Megumi Fushiguro, and he was looking for a cursed object. Yuji wasn't really all that familiar with the term, but apparently this kid was claiming that Yuji was in the possession of one that was extremely dangerous. Okay, now Yuji was getting confused. What was so dangerous about this cursed object? What even was a cursed object? Yuji would question all of this, to be honest, because this kid was talking about the cursed object, and now he was also bringing up curses, because this cursed object that Yuji just so happened to have actually could attract curses in all shapes and sizes. Yuji would question what a curse was and what a cursed object was. Megumi would mention how he didn't really have a whole lot of time, but he would just explain the basics, and when it came onto curses especially, this would get Yuji's interest because of how he explained it. He just explained that they were a manifestation of humans' negative emotions, that they were like monsters that came in all shapes and sizes. And with the description of these quote-unquote monsters, this would cause for Yuji's eyes to widen. This was the first time that Yuji was hearing somebody mention seeing the same sort of stuff as him. He would be invested in Megumi's story and search in his book bag for the artifact before handing him the box. He had taken it from like one of those school sheds or something along those lines. I don't know what's the proper word for it. But Megumi, when he opened up the box, he realized it was empty. This realization would upset the boy. Yuji would right then and there remember handing one of his friends fingered, and one of his friends from the occult club. Apparently they were going to try to unwrap it tonight. They were hoping to summon spirits with this weird finger. This naturally actually alarmed Megami. They actually really needed to go now. There was absolutely no way that they could just let that person unwrap that finger, because, well, he's already explained it before, but several curses would immediately come and attack them, hoping to consume that finger, and who knows what would happen if they consume that finger. The two would head to Yuji's high school in hopes of making it before Yuji's friends unwrap the wax concealing the cursed object. But Yuji would immediately feel a strange, overwhelming sensation when he made it to the school. He'd realize that they were too late. His friends had opened up the seal already, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance that they were still alive. Megami, he would rush forward, summoning a pair of wolf-like creatures in order to aid him in battle. Yuji, he would be on a more hesitant side though, at first. He never really had experienced anything like this before. So many curses were oozing inside of this building and he was scared. He was seeing all of these curses all at once, and all these different shapes and sizes. He was used to seeing like some of them, but they were usually just scattered, not such a dense amount, such scary monsters. He was scared of dying, but he would see Megami cutting down on most of these curses in hopes of making it to Yuji's friends before they were killed. He would realize right then and there just how cowardly he was acting. Not only this, but the whole issue of death was something that confused Yuji. He was seeing Megami basically risk his life in order to save Yuji's friends, and he was so scared right now. He was unnerved. This was Yuji's thought process, but he was also thinking back to when his grandfather died. He wasn't scared of anything. He was sad, sure, but he knew that his grandfather died peacefully. His friends, though, this wasn't how they were supposed to die. They needed a more respectful or a respectable way of dying. This wasn't their time yet. With all of this going through Yuji's mind, he would rush in basically. He understood that his grandfather raised him to be better than this after all. He would be lying if he said that he wasn't still scared in this moment, even while he was running, but he would do his best to suppress it for right now. He understood what was more important. He would barge into the building, coming from the 4th floor in order to help out Megami. Yuji, he would arrive just in time to rescue his friends, and Megami, he would actually be grateful that Yuji arrived at the time he did, since that was a very close call back there. He honestly had to admit, because these curses, they were getting a bit too out of hand. Some of them he just couldn't handle anymore, at least without a distraction. Yuji just came in at the right moment. He really did have to thank Yuji for that. And after he finished taking down the rest of these curses, Megami, he would want to try and retrieve the cursed object, Sukuna's finger, and he would comment on the nature of Yuji's eyes while doing it. What exactly were they? Since his first meeting with Yuji, he noticed that the boy was full of cursed energy, with a lot of it being focused around his eyes for whatever reason. From their interaction so far as well, it was clear that Yuji wasn't a Jujutsu sorcerer by any means either, which it just continued to confuse Megumi. What exactly was Yuji? Yuji was about to reply, but he would be interrupted by a sudden crash landing made by a curse from the floor above. Wow, just great. Megami, he would immediately push Yuji out of the way. He would end up getting captured by the curse instead though. Yuji, he would try his very best to help Megami out of his current predicament, but it would be of no use. He could only harm the monster using curse energy. At least that's what it seemed to be. He noticed how Megami was able to fight. He also noticed these strange wolf-like creatures, and he was scratching his head as to how they appeared. But he figured that it might just be because of something that Megami has. He always talked about negative well, not always, but he was talking about negative emotions back at the hospital that humans had, and then he was also talking about cursed energy. His eyes or something had a lot of cursed energy, and now he's realizing that these creatures that Megami summoned, they were probably made up of cursed energy. But now Yuji was trying to fight. He was actually trying to fight on Megami's behalf, but he did not necessarily know how to wield cursed energy. This was an issue. He didn't know how to use cursed energy whatsoever. He was beginning to lose ground against the monster as well, and he was beginning to panic. Megami was the only one who seemed to be capable of injuring these monsters, while Yuji, he was meant to be more of a distraction up until now. But currently, Megami was in a compromised position. If Yuji didn't act quick, then who knows what would happen. Everyone here was probably going to die. There was no guarantee that there was going to be somebody else who could be the knight in shining armor, nobody to save them, and if that was the case, Yuji did not want to die here. Yuji did not want anybody else to die here in such an improper manner. Yuji was trying to think of anything else he could possibly do, but he was pulling constant blanks. That was until he just remembered a second ago about Megami's comment. Once again, this comment would go through his mind. Something about his eyes and their strange properties, with them seemingly having an abundance of cursed energy. Was this what his grandfather meant by his eyes being special? Time would slow down for Yuji as he saw Megami about to be eaten. Oh no. Practically on instinct though, two words would be uttered out of Yuji's tongue. Shinra Tensei. An invisible wave of force would exude from Yuji. The sheer force would be enough to completely destroy the curse that was about to eat Megami, popping it as if it were a simple balloon. Megami would be sent sliding back too, but he would be more in a state of shock than anything. Yuji would stand above the rubble, with his eyes now shining in a divine light. He would grab his head in pain though, because all of a sudden, he'll be forced to process all of this new sensory information. He would look and see that he was able to suddenly see the flow of cursed energy as if it were a physical map. Megami, he wouldn't even be able to ask what had just happened though, as Gojo would arrive on the scene right after. He would observe the situation around him and look to Yuji before pausing. He was genuinely speechless when looking at the boy's eyes. It was something he hadn't seen before. With the 6 eyes, he could observe that the boy's eyes, they were more than a simple curse technique, but instead, they were akin to a mutation of cursed energy. These eyes, they were meant to mimic the laws of the universe itself. With his eyes having already handled the threat, Yuji, he wouldn't have a reason to swallow Sukuna's finger here. This wouldn't mean that he wouldn't be. This wouldn't mean that he will be left alone, though. Instead, he will be brought to the Jujutsu higher ups in an attempt to figure out what had just happened. In order to figure out not just what had just happened, but also to figure out what to do with him, since, well, it was clear that he couldn't just be left to his own devices. He'll be labeled as a special great anomaly right off the bat. The higher ups didn't understand Yuji whatsoever. This lack of understanding for the boy and his eyes made them fear him. He wasn't even a vessel for the king of curses, but yet his powerful abilities were already something to be wary of. They had no idea the full extent of his capabilities, though. They couldn't simply execute the boy either, thanks to Gojo putting in a good word for the boy. Gojo would essentially become the boy's teacher, teaching him how to unlock the rest of the paths by relating them to cursed energy, the Deva path. Yuji would master Shinra Tensei and Chewbacca Tensei. Well, I shouldn't say he mastered it. He would attempt to master the Shinra Tensei, and he would begin to learn how to use the Chewbacca Tensei as well during his time under Gojo. And with the Chewbacca Tensei, this would end up being his way of trapping different curses and balls of floating earth, if he could actually have enough time to do that, that is. But for the meanwhile, they would end up recruiting another person. This person's name was Nobura. She would be part of the team after some time of practicing with the eyes, and this time around, they would be deployed on their first mission after, some practicing, getting to know each other, that sort of stuff. It would be all three of them this time, since Megami, he wouldn't necessarily be all that injured in this version of events. The group, they will be tasked with exorcising any curses that decided to roam the inside of an abandoned building. It was a fairly easy mission. Gojo, he just wanted to see what the group was capable of. While in the building, they will come across a curse that showed certain signs of intelligence. They were trying to use a kid as a hostage, but Megami, he would just send a flurry of rabbits at it, forcing it to let go of the kid. Nobura, she would attack using a straw doll technique. Yuji would end up using an onslaught. Wait, what? I meant Yuji would end the onslaught with an almighty push. This would crush the curse, and the group, they would prove to be able to work as a team. And just crazy enough as well to be Jujutsu sorcerers, according to Gojo, that is. The next assessment would be with facing a special grade curse, though, after a cursed womb had just given birth in the detention center. This time around, though, Gojo would not be around for the students to fall back on. It was a do or die sort of situation for them. All of the inhabitants that were, living in the detention center, they had already been slaughtered too. So as soon as they were to enter the center, the cursed energy, it would hit Yuji harder than anybody else. You see his eyes, they would begin to react immediately. The rings would begin to spin slightly, attempting to adjust to such an overwhelming pressure in the atmosphere. Everything here just felt wrong. To Yuji, it felt as if the entire building was folding in on him. His vision, it began to blur for a second before sharpening again. And suddenly, he could see what appeared to be faint outlines of cursed energy trails. Was this something that all Jujutsu sorcerers saw? He was confused. Megumi, he would take a glance at Yuji before asking about his condition. Yuji would confirm that he was okay. It was just that his eyes, they were acting up for a second, that was all. He didn't really have that much time to explain, because they would hear a scream echo from deeper inside the detention center. The whole time Yuji's eyes, they would be warning him though about the danger ahead. This cursed energy density, it was beyond his level. It was unlike anything ever felt before. Suddenly Yuji's eyes, they would widen with a sudden realization. He would try to warn the others, but it would already be too late. The hallway ahead, it would twist unnaturally with a massive grotesque arm bursting through the wall. The rest of the special grade curse would reveal itself right after. The presence of this thing alone made the entire building shake. This was Nobura's first time dealing with something of this caliber. She wanted to move, but her body it just stood frozen in fear. Megumi would be the first to react, stepping forward and summoning his dogs. Yuji would feel his heart practically beat out of his chest here. His eyes, they would start violently vibrating, trying to process everything that was standing before him. The cursed energy of this curse, it just swirled like a storm before it decided to launch itself at the three. Although Megumi would send his dogs at the curse, they would be swatted away like flies. Nobura only barely dodged an attack from the curse. Yuji would try to dodge, but the pressure continued to crush him, leading to his knees buckling before him. Before it hit him, the curse's attention would shift towards Nobura. They would aim an attack at her, but this time she would not be fast enough to dodge. Time would slow down for Yuji here. He would not have enough time to think. Instead, his body would just move instinctively before he could come up with anything else to do. He would grab and shove her out the way, taking on the attack from the curse himself. The curse would claw his back and send him flying into a wall. All Yuji felt was a hot pain. There was an intense ringing in his ears as his vision flickered. Megumi and Nobura would try yelling Yuji's name, but he couldn't hear them. Yuji would attempt to stand back up, with the blood leaking out of his back. The rings in Yuji's eyes, they would begin to spin faster, syncing with his heartbeat. He turned around to look at his struggling teammates. Megumi was barely holding on, while Nobura, she could hardly get up. The curse was preparing to kill them both. He couldn't let that happen though. He knew he had power, but was it really enough? Time would slow for Yuji once again, but this time it would be different. When you see his breath, it would steady, and his fear quieted. His eyes would glow with a divine violet light. He would instinctively utter two powerful words: Almighty Push. Immediately, a violent shockwave would erupt from his body. This one would be different though. It was far more powerful than the one he had used for the first time at his old school. The entirety of the hallway just exploded outward, with debris flying and launching the special grade through multiple walls. Although his teammates were thrown back as well, they weren't actually harmed here. After the shockwave, Yuji would collapse to one knee though, clutching his head. His vision was blurry and his head was hot, pounding with pain and sensory overload. The very next moment, he could practically see everything. Every individual cursed particle, energy flow, distortion in space, he could see it all. Yuji would cough out some blood right after though. Megumi would look at Yuji, stunned. He would question, just what was he? This was something that would be left unanswered though. The special grade wasn't done here though. It would get up from underneath the rubble, roaring angrier than it already was. Their cursed energy would spike, shaking the entire building. Yuji forced himself to stand back up, and he would lock eyes with the curse. Instead of the crazy swirl of energy from before, though, Yuji saw something new. It was a concentrated knot of cursed energy deep within the curse's body. Was this a weak point? He knew what he had to do. He would start to limp towards the curse, but the curse was still incredibly fast, even faster than before, actually. It appeared right behind Yuji in what felt like an instant, driving its arm straight through the boy's shoulder. Yuji would scream in pain. Megami, Megami, he would just panic seeing this, and he would try to summon every Shikigami he could in this moment. Unfortunately, none seemed to be able to reach Yuji in time. The curse would lift Yuji off the ground, ready to tear him apart. Yuji's vision blurred once more, and blood dripped onto the floor. His eyes would flicker, and then he would hear a voice echo in his head. It would be a faint echo though, and it would be from a voice that he didn't recognize. All it told him was to use it properly, and before he knew it, his eyes would begin to spin violently once more. This time, the curse felt danger for the first time. It would try to pull away, but it would have already been too late. Usually, he would raise his hand and yell, "Shinra Tensei." This shockwave was the most powerful one yet. The curse was blasted through the ceiling, roof, and into the sky. The entirety of the detention center shook as if it had just been hit by an earthquake. Megami, he would try to rush over to Yuji, checking to see his condition. Yuji's breathing was unsteady. His eyes hardly had any light in them. Nomura, she would just look on in a mix of awe and fear, commenting on how that wasn't normal cursed energy. This was something entirely different. Yuji would drift in and out of consciousness as Megami and Nomura carried him out of the collapsing detention center. His body was battered, shoulder nearly torn in two, and cursed energy pathways unstable from the sheer force that the almighty push released. Megami would grit his teeth in frustration. He was too weak to do anything substantial to keep Yuji from pushing himself so far. Nomura, she would remain silent, continuously rewinding the recent events in her head. Right when Nomura was about to open her mouth, though, a familiar voice would echo behind them. It would be that of Gojo, though, with his hands in his pockets, commenting on the adventure that they had seemingly just had. He walked over to them with his blindfold tilted up slightly to reveal one of his eyes. As soon as he looked at Yuji, though, he would just freeze. It wasn't fear or confusion on his face, though. It was actually astonishment. He would crouch beside Yuji, lifting the boy's chin slightly to examine his eyes. The rings in Yuji's irises, they were faintly glowing, rotating slowly. This truly was nothing like he'd seen before. He would whisper underneath his breath, speaking on how this wasn't a cursed technique. It wasn't even just regular cursed energy either. It was a mutation of cursed energy itself, actually, a phenomenon he had only heard about in stories. Megami would look at Gojo surprised. He would begin to question him about his knowledge of Yuji's eyes, but Gojo would just not be able to answer Megami's questions. He would fail to quench Megami's curiosity, just explaining that he had no real answers as to what Yuji's eyes were and what was happening to him. And that was a problem here. His expression, it would be serious, something that was rare for him actually. He'd order for the two to take him to Shoko immediately. For 2 days straight, Yuji would stay unconscious. His body wasn't just healing during this time though, but it was adapting as well. This mutation of his was stabilizing itself, syncing with his cursed energy. When he woke up, he could tell that something was different. Something was off. His senses were even stronger than before. He could see the flow of cursed energy through the walls, people walking down the hallways. He could sense that too. Even the gravitational pull of objects he could feel. Shoko would check on Yuji's condition, commenting on how he was healing at a remarkable rate. It was actually too fast, now that she thought about it. She would explain to Yuji that it seemed as if his body was too weak for his eyes originally, and now it's been reinforcing itself to handle the greater power of it. Yuji would be confused by the explanation, simply asking if that meant he wasn't dying today. Shoko would just sigh before nodding. She would explain that he needed control because without it, his eyes, they would just tear his body apart. And just like that, right on cue, Gojo would enter the room. He would explain that he would be taking over Yuji's training again. Yuji would be confused at first, but Gojo would simply explain that since Yuji unlocked something new, it meant new lessons as well. Gojo would train Yuji in 3 main areas. The first would be the David path. He would learn to do small pushes and pulls without immediately destroying everything around him. That included pushing a pebble across the ground, pulling a leaf toward his hand, redirecting thrown objects midair. Erasers would even be flicked at him actually during training by Gojo just to increase the boy's reaction speed. As for the sensory regulation part, his eyes, he had been given them. Okay, he had been having trouble with his eyes. They were giving him too much information. To this, Gojo understood where he was coming from, and he would teach the boy how to dim his perception so he wouldn't overload like last time. The best way Yuji could compare it to was like lowering the brightness on a phone. As for the Predator path, this was something that he had just recently unlocked. He would learn to absorb small amounts of cursed energy in attacks. Not necessarily the entirety of it, but just enough that it can neutralize weak projectiles. Gojo would warn Yuji though that absorbing too much could run the risk of frying his brain, so he shouldn't get cocky relying solely on that. Yuji understood, but he was getting excited now. He finally felt like he was growing into his eyes. With Yuji never officially having died in this version of events, Yuji's initial meeting with Nanami would be through him being assigned to Nanami as well, a trainee. Initially, he would just be annoyed, but Nanami would accept Yuji as his assistant for the time anyways. When Yuji first saw the transfigured humans Mahito had created, he would see the twisted and mangled souls and suffering. Here he would realize that curses, they weren't just monsters, they were distortions of humanity. In the case of Mahito, he directly manipulated the souls of people, something that was more precious and invaluable than anything else in this world. When the two finally confronted Mahito, Yuji's eyes, they would immediately flare up. The rings spanned rapidly in reaction to Mahito's idle transfiguration. Mahito would tilt his head in confusion and fascination at the same time, commenting on how the boy's eyes, they were interesting. Yuji would step forward with his fists clenched. He would comment on how Mahito was the one to have messed with the souls of all these people. Mahito would show glee on his face when realizing Yuji had recognized his work. Yuji, seeing this, would have his anger spike through the roof, and his David path would respond in tow. A gravitational pull would ripple through the air, cracking the ground beneath him. Nanami would see this and tell him to control himself. Yuji would nod, breathing deeply.
Mahito would lunge towards Yuji, but he would dodge thanks to his enhanced perception. Right when Yuji was about to punch him, though, Mahito would shift his soul, reshaping his body. Yuji's fist passed through harmlessly. Mahito would mock him, saying that he couldn't touch him. Yuji would glare at Mahito for a second until he saw something. It was faint, but there. His eyes would widen with realization. It was an outline of Mahito's true soul, which had been buried underneath several layers of cursed energy. Yuji would launch another fist at Mahito, but this time it wouldn't be his body. Mahito thought that would be the case, only for him to realize too late that it was a distortion itself. His eyes widened as Yuji actually managed to graze his soul. He would clench his chest, recoiling in shock. He would comment on the fact that Yuji could see it. Nanami would just be confused for a second, but it seemed to be important. He would question Yuji on what he did, and Yuji would say that he wasn't exactly sure himself, but he would explain that he saw something inside Mahito. Mahito's smile would return, sharper than ever. He was dangerous, and he liked that about Yuji. Mahito would create a distraction at the last second before Yuji could get another hit in and flee the scene. Mahito had now become obsessed with learning more about Yuji now. It wasn't because of his strength or anything though, but rather his eyes. From here on out, he would begin planning specifically around Yuji, wanting to see the absolute limits of his soul perception. As for Yuji's interactions with Junpei, yeah, they remain almost the same as canon, I'm not gonna lie. The only difference here is that, well, him being able to see the cursed energy around Junpei's house. That would just be the main difference here. And he could feel Mahito's influence lingering. He knew something was wrong. Unfortunately, he would be too late to save Junpei though. He would be forced to witness Junpei's twisted form and his reaction to this, with his eyes immediately spinning violently. They spun so fast that they became a blur. Yuji would scream at Mahito to stop. Mahito would simply smirk though, telling Yuji to force him to stop. Yuji's range would cause for a massive gravitational pulse. This wasn't a controlled almighty push though, but it would be a raw, emotional explosion. The ground would cave in and walls would collapse. Mahito would be thrown back. Yuji charged forward with tears running down his face, yelling that it was all Mahito's fault. In response, Mahito would troll Yuji by saying guilty as charged. Yuji's punch, it would land, and this punch, Yuji made sure Mahito felt it. His eyes locked onto Mahito's soul, and the impact was enough to shake Mahito to his core. Mahito would stumble back, horrified. Mahito would comment on how Yuji shouldn't be able to do this. Yuji's voice would be cold though. He simply stated that he was going to kill him. Nanami would arrive right on time though, to prevent Yuji from losing himself completely. Yuji's eyes would go through another shift after this event. Mahito managed to flee once more with a distraction that Nanami had managed to make for him, unintentionally. The next ability that emerged after Mahito's escape though, it was called the Human Path. With this, Yuji could now sense emotional imprints, detect lies, the weight of one's soul, and see the shape of a soul directly. Gojo would notice this immediately. He would comment on how Yuji was evolving faster than expected. Yuji didn't know how to take that. Was that bad? Gojo would shake his head though. It was only bad for those that made themselves Yuji's enemies. With Yuji never having died in this version of events, his reintroduction this time to the Tokyo team wouldn't be as surprising. The Kyoto students were even more suspicious of Yuji here though. He was an unprecedented phenomenon. He wasn't to be trusted. When they saw him for the first time, they immediately focused on his eyes. Miwa would be the first to comment on him, questioning if he was even human. Momo would narrow her eyes, saying that he was dangerous. Noritoshi would study Yuji carefully, bringing up how it didn't appear his eyes were any sort of technique, but rather something else he didn't understand. Todo would walk up to Yuji though, grabbing his shoulders and staring deeply into the boy's eyes. To everyone's surprise though, Todo didn't come off as hostile towards Yuji. No, not at all, whatsoever. Instead, he would call him his brother, and that his eyes told him everything he needed to know. Yuji would raise an eyebrow to this. What could his eyes have possibly told him? Todo answered his question by explaining that they told him Yuji had an exquisite taste in women. Yuji would comment on how he didn't say anything though. Todo simply said that he didn't have to. With the Goodwill event, it would be revealed to be anything but that. You see, the whole thing would be recorded. Kyoto higher-ups would whisper among themselves about Yuji's evolution. He wasn't a vessel, but something worse. They feared the potential of the boy, eventually becoming too much for them to control. They wanted to prevent that from early on and tried to eliminate him during the event. They would see the smirk on Gojo's face though as he stood behind Yuji's team. It was a taunt towards them. While Yuji and Todo began bonding, the Kyoto higher-ups would put their plan into motion by ordering the rest of the Kyoto students to eliminate Yuji and make it look like an accident. There would be a loose screw in their plans though, and that would be in the form of Todo. He would actually refuse here, standing in front of Yuji with his arms crossed. He would explain that to kill his brother, they would have to go through him first. Kamo would frown hearing this, trying to get Todo to become cooperative. He would state that this was not personal, but Todo would rebuttal by saying it was now. Yuji's eyes would flicker, seeing the tension, cursed energy buildup, and intent. In order to stop the conflict before it broke into a fight between classmates, he would step in between them. He would straight up say that he was not going to fight any of them. Miura would hesitate hearing this. He wasn't what the higher-ups had described him as whatsoever. Momo would comment on how he was just a kid. Marucho Zero changed in emotion though, mentioning how he was still dangerous. Mekamaru would raise his arm cannon toward Yuji. Yuji's eyes widened, recognizing the cursed energy buildup inside the cannon. He would raise his hand and activate his Preta Path. The blast would dissolve into Yuji's palm like smoke. Everyone in the vicinity would freeze. Kamo would whisper to himself, questioning if his eyes had deceived him, or did Yuji just absorb Mekamaru's cursed energy? Yuji would lower his hand, breathing heavily. He didn't want to fight any of them. Todo would place a hand on Yuji's shoulder, exclaiming that Yuji wouldn't have to fight anyone while he was here. When Hanami attacks though, that's when the entire forest would tremble. The sky would darken and cursed energy flooded the area like a tidal wave. Yuji's eyes would react immediately. The rings would spin faster than ever and his vision would shift. Hanami's energy wouldn't appear to him as a mass, but instead as a network, roots, branches, and nodes of cursed life. Hanami would step forward, approaching and addressing Yuji directly. Child with the strange eyes. You see it too. Nature's sorrow. Yuji would just clench his fist though, saying that all he saw was Hanami hurting people. Hanami would be enraged hearing this answer from the boy. They thought about recruiting Yuji for a second, but that didn't seem to be what was going to happen today. Hanami would raise an arm, with vines lashing out. Yuji would use Bansho Tenon in order to pull himself out of the attack's path. Todo appeared beside him. He would request that they fight together, and Yuji nodded in agreement. The two would rush Hanami. Todo would deal the heavy blows while Yuji used gravitational pulses in order to distort Hanami's movements. Hanami was tough though. too strong to be affected by their attacks in this state. Yuji's eyes would shift once more, allowing for him to see a core inside Hanami. It was a seed of cursed energy. Yuji wouldn't say anything, and instead charged a focused almighty push, aiming directly at Hanami's core. Hanami realized exactly where Yuji was aiming though, and would raise a wall of roots in retaliation. Todo would yell for Yuji to release the attack. Yuji would do exactly that, releasing a shockwave powerful enough to tear through the roots and slamming into Hanami's chest. The curse would be sent flying, crashing through several trees. Hanami just barely managed to survive this attack though, and be forced to retreat and recover for now. Gojo would arrive moments later, smiling. He would compliment the kids for holding their own. He would look at Yuji's eyes though, and for the first time, now he showed concern. After the defeat of Hanami in the Kyoto Goodwill event, the higher-ups, they would be panicking. Yuji just continued to grow even stronger than they could imagine. He had seemingly mastered a controlled version of Almighty Push, learned Bansho Tenin, developed advanced sensory perception, and had begun detecting soul distortions. The last one was from a report made by Nanami. They hadn't evolved into anything new just yet, simply stabilized. That was the frightening part about Yuji. They had no idea when his next evolution was going to be. Gojo would be just as uneasy as a higher-up so this time around. He was growing too fast, and the world was reacting, trying to correct this imbalance. You see, curses would begin behaving strangely around Tokyo. Some would begin to flee from Yuji when he approached. Others, they would attack with hyper-aggression, only for their efforts to be in vain. There would be a few that simply stared at him in fear, recognizing something ancient about him. Even the legs of Mahito and the other disaster curses became more cautious when it came onto Yuji. He would tell Geto that the boy's eyes rejected his very existence. Geto would call him a threat, with a smile on his face. Mahito agreed, saying that threats had to be understood. The man knew all too well about Yuji's eyes though, but he would keep that knowledge to himself. He would simply reflect for now. See, the Renegon was something so ancient that it existed before even the Heian era. There were no techniques back then, no domains or schools, but only raw, unfiltered cursed energy. Amongst all this chaos though, one sorcerer rose above them all. Sukuna was his name, and he held a mutation of cursed energy so rare and ancient that it bent the natural laws of the universe. It wasn't a gift though. It was a curse of evolution. It was a mutation born from extreme cursed energy density, a soul that would not break, and a body adapted to go beyond human limits. These eyes had existed before Sukuna, inhabiting different vessels, but each had early deaths. None could really handle the full power of the Renegon, and unfortunately, this included Sukuna as well. Sukuna's original power came in the form of the Renegon. It had made him a god. The issue was that the mutation was too powerful for a mere human soul, and even though someone like Sukuna existed, he couldn't handle it forever. He tried to make up for it by relying on his curse technique, developing it as something to deal with the weak while not putting any more strain on himself. But it was too late to reverse time. He would make a binding vow with Kenjaku though, to disperse his cursed energy into his fingers. Instead of accepting to just die early though, Sukuna would make another binding vow to have his soul be fractured. It wasn't into different personalities or clones or anything, no. Instead, he wanted it to become echoes, fragments of his consciousness that would linger even after his supposed death or sealing. Even after Sukuna passed on, the Rinnegan didn't appear in the world any longer. Although clans tried to replicate this, they all seemingly failed. All these failures, the six eyes would come into existence though. With all these failures, the six eyes became a trophy for the Gojo clan, and its legacy would replace the Renegon. Its history would be forgotten and become nothing more than just a myth. That was until a certain Yuji came into the picture. Kenjaku had tried to construct a vessel for Sukuna in the form of Yuji. He had seen how the clans failed to reconstruct the Rinnegan in the past, and only planned on creating someone to house Sukuna's cursed technique. Yuji just so happened to be a luck of the draw though. He was different from Sukuna. His soul was stronger, stabler, and more adaptable. He was the first in ages to have a soul that could withstand the mutation without breaking. For now, that is. He wasn't sure what the future dictated, but he was interested to find out. Yuji, in this version of events, had yet to consume a single one of Sukuna's fingers. Sukuna's fingers, they still existed though, and curses sought after him, especially with the existence of Yuji in this world. The higher-ups still feared the King of Curses and the potential of him coming back to terrorize the world again. He had yet to have a proper vessel though. But something new would begin to happen. Yuji's eyes would begin to react to Sukuna's fingers. They recognized his fingers with a look of recognition as opposed to any form of violence or pain. It was as if Yuji's eyes were tied to the same primordial energy Sukuna once held. Gojo would notice this immediately, and he would bring him to a sealed finger for testing. He needed to make sure that he wasn't just seeing things or it was just a coincidence. The moment that they entered the room, Gojo would observe the finger suddenly twitching. Yuji's eyes would glow faintly as well. Gojo's expression would darken seeing this. Your eyes. They resonate with Sukuna. Yuji would hear this and take a step back, looking at Gojo in horror. He had heard stories about Ryomen Sukuna. He didn't want anything to do with that being. Gojo would look on in dismay, explaining that he may not have had a choice in the matter. For some reason, Yuji's mutation had suddenly begun to awaken something dormant. Sukuna's consciousness would stir, not necessarily physically, but instead like a whisper in the fabric of cursed energy. Curses would begin to make reports about there being a sighting of a shadow of the king. Mahito would be the first to sense it and comment on how it seemed that Sukuna was waking up through the boy instead of through a proper vessel. Kenjaku would smile hearing this. They just needed to push him further then. From there, Yuji's training intensified. The focus for the David path would be on micro pushes, directional pushes, area of effect repulsion, and mind-air stabilization. Close-range combat was his best friend. With soul perception, he could sense lies, detect emotional intent, read the shape of a soul, and predict Mahito's attacks. Mahito's greatest advantage was null and void around Yuji, and this terrified Mahito. To play the path, Yuji learned to absorb weak cursed projectiles, environmental cursed energy, and minor techniques. Yuji would remember Gojo's warning though about frying his brain when it came to his usage of this path. During a routine mission, the team they would just discover a sealed finger that was hidden inside a cursed womb. As soon as Yuji touched the box, though, his eyes would flare violently. The rings would spin out of control and the air distorted around him. Megumi and Nobuo would grab onto Yuji, telling him to let go. He would drop the box, and gasp. He would hear something though. It was something whispering to him. Not something, but someone. It was a faint voice. All it said was, "Finally, you can hear me." To this, Yuji would freeze. Megumi looked at him in confusion, asking what was wrong. Yuji would comment on hearing someone that wasn't here physically speaking to him. The groom's eyes would widen. Who? Yuji would just swallow hard and explain that he thought it was Sukuna. Sukuna, he wouldn't appear physically here. Rather than physically taking over Yuji's body or manifesting in any physical sense. No. He would only be speaking to Yuji here when he was near a finger. He existed as a dormant consciousness awakened by Yuji's eyes. He was weak, faint, but he was not unaware. He was interested in Yuji. Those eyes. They aren't yours. They're mine. Yuji would just yell aloud for Sukuna to stay out of his head though, but the king of curses, he would simply laugh. During this time, Kenjaku would be learning about this development. He would realize that Yuji's eyes were awakening Sukuna and that the king of curses consciousness was tied to the fingers. Yuji wasn't a perfect vessel because he ate a finger here. No. Rather, he had the eyes that mimicked the laws Sukuna once commanded. The plans had officially shifted now. Shibuya wasn't about just sealing Gojo anymore. It was about forcing Yuji to awaken Sukuna fully. Mahito, hearing this, would be thrilled actually. He would be able to break the boy's soul and awaken the king of curses. Hanami was still recovering from the events of the Goodwill event, with some of the damage Yuji having dealt to them seemingly becoming irreversible. Jogo would be eager to awaken the king of curses as well. Choso would sense something familiar in Yuji's energy too. He didn't know what it was though. In the meantime, Yuji would be spotted sitting across from his mentor, Gojo, in an empty training room. He'd been avoiding conversations with this man for several hours, but he couldn't avoid it any longer. He would finally speak about hearing a voice in his head. It wasn't just any voice either, but it was Sukuna's. The room would go silent from this revelation. Gojo would lower his blindfold enough to where his 6 eyes would show, studying the boy carefully. It wasn't with fear though, but a seriousness that was foreign to the likes of Gojo. He wanted to know exactly what happened in full detail. Yuji would explain how he had a sort of resonance with the finger, whisper, this feeling of something ancient brushing against his consciousness. Throughout the whole explanation, Gojo would not interrupt. He would just simply listen intently to the boy. By the time he finished, all Gojo would do was sigh. He had a feeling something like this was going to happen sooner or later with those eyes of his. He would explain to Yuji that the boy's eyes, they weren't just a mutation, but something that was connected to something far older. So old that it probably predated the modern Jujutsu world. Yuji had a look of fear on his face. He would ask if this meant Sukuna was inside of him, but Gojo would shut that theory down immediately. Rather than being inside of him, it was Yuji's eyes that had woken up the king of curses. For now, Sukuna's consciousness, it was weak and fragmented, but it was still aware. He'd warned Yuji that if Sukuna's consciousness were to get any stronger, he would try to use Yuji. Yuji would declare that that was not going to happen though. That would make Gojo smile. But there was still a bit of uneasiness behind that smile though. October 31st would arrive after this, and Shibuya would be packed to the brim with crowds moving like a school of fish. Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi would arrive with their assigned teams. Instantly though, Yuji's eyes would react to the cursed energy in the air. It was thick, layered, and unnatural. Megumi and Nobara would notice Yuji tense up, but they both knew Yuji's eyes. They never lied. Something was terribly wrong. A massive curtain would just drop over Shibuya, and curses would begin to appear all over the city. With this, Yuji's eyes, they would flare, seeing the cursed energy stretching all throughout the city. Nobara and Megumi would notice the abundance of curses too. The group would split up in order to help the civilians escape the curtain's trap. Yuji would find himself encountering a group of curse users blocking an underground passage. One would recognize Yuji and smile while all their teeth were out, calling him the kid with the eyes. Yuji would simply tell them to move. They wouldn't listen. Yuji would get into conflict with them, forcing them to move using Shinra Tensei to deflect knives, Bansho Tenyin to pull one of the curse users off balance, and he would use his enhanced perception to dodge attacks right before they could land. Megumi would summon Nu to electrify the battlefield. Nobara would have two curse users pinned with resonance, with a final move in the form of a gravitational attack, or gravitational strike. Yuji would finish off the last of the curse users. Megumi would make a comment on how they were stalling the three of them. Yuji and Nobara would agree, but what though would be the main question on everybody's mind. Suddenly, Yuji would feel the cursed energy spike. He would recognize Gojo's presence from anywhere. Something still felt off though, even with Gojo in the vicinity. Gojo was too far away for him to actually catch up to him right now. He and the group had to deal with the rest of the curses and curse users all throughout the city. Gojo would deal with the likes of the disaster curses per usual, but it would be when the prison realm activated that Yuji would sense something tear violently through the fabric of cursed energy. Yuji would yell at the others that Gojo, he was in danger. They needed some way to just find him immediately, regardless of the distance. Well, he would be in the middle of saying this when he felt the prison realm close. He would feel Sukuna whisper in the back of his head, silently laughing. The strongest of your era has fallen. Yuji would refuse to accept this though. His eyes would show rage and grief, but Megumi would grab his shoulders, telling him to lock in. They had to keep moving. With Gojo gone, Shibuya would turn into a hellscape. Suddenly curses, they would begin flooding the streets, and civilians would scream in terror as several suddenly caught on fire. Buildings would collapse. Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara would be caught in the crossfire of all this. They'd be dealing with the curses. Yuji would crush several of these curses with a controlled almighty push, pull civilians out of danger via Bansho Tenyin, and absorb cursed projectiles with a Predapath. He would even read the intent of several enemies with soul perception. He'd be fighting non-stop, but the longer he fought for, the more his eyes would just seem to react. The consequences of all of this would be the voice in his head becoming clearer little by little. He'd ignore him for as long as he could though. He had bigger fish to fry right now. The three would split up once more, and this time with Yuji eventually encountering the likes of Mahito. Yuji's blood would run cold seeing him. He would step forward, twisting the soul in various new shapes. Right behind him would be a tsunami of transfigured humans. Yuji would clutch his fists though, tight enough to where his blood would begin to actually leak out. Mahito would begin to monologue about Yuji's eyes rejecting him, but all Yuji heard was static. Eventually, Yuji would speak about all the blood on Mahito's hands, Junpei and Makamaru, and all of those that were ever close to them. Mahito simply looked at him with an amused look, confirming that yeah, that was him. There was no regret in his eyes. His only regret, Mahito would say, is that he wished he made them suffer longer. Yuji would respond accordingly. Using the Renegon, He would see Mahito's soul directly and predict his transformation. He would avoid idle transfiguration by reading each soul distortion and leave Mahito shocked. Yet Yuji would land a punch rocking Mahito to his core. We'd realize just how much Yuji had evolved since their last encounter, and it seemed as if he was evolving mid-battle too. Mahito would attempt to split his body into two and use that to get the jump on Yuji. He would send several other transfigured humans at Yuji too, trying to distract him. He knew Yuji was going to get through them easily. That didn't matter. What mattered was that he was going to use his two bodies in order to attack Yuji directly, and even attempt to transfigure him as well. Yuji would get overwhelmed for a bit. It would get to the point that he was getting injured by Mahito and unable to actually get the chance to charge up a large-scale almighty push. He would get slammed into a wall with blood dripping from down his head. Mahito would be elated to see Yuji in this weakened state. His eyes were getting overwhelmed, it seemed to him, and he'd been waiting for this moment since, since forever, honestly. He had misinterpreted what Yuji's eyes were showing, though. In this moment, Yuji's eyes, they were actually evolving once more. It would show with Yuji's body beginning to adapt in order to survive. His cursed energy would channel into his arms. His body would begin to morph into something more mechanical. And in that moment, he had formed cursed energy constructs and unlocked the Ashura path. Mahito would step back in shock and fear. He didn't understand what he was witnessing. This wasn't like anything he had ever heard about when it came on to the Renegon user. With the Ashura path active, Yuji's punches would be enhanced even more than usual, even further. It would be enough to immediately break through Mahito's guard and shake his soul. Mahito would panic and throw a tantrum about this not being fair. Yuji showed zero emotion here. Instead, he would simply grab the curse's arm and slam him into the ground. Mahito would shift his soul at the last second though, turning into a mouse in order to actually escape Yuji. He would flee into the tunnels with Yuji chasing after him. Yuji would stop though. He had sensed something. It was Megami. He was in serious danger. Yuji could sense a massive release of cursed energy. This wasn't good though. Megami's life force was drifting away while this massive spike in cursed energy just appeared out of what felt like nowhere. He would just sprint towards Megami's direction to see just what was going on and to protect Megami from the source of that cursed energy. He could tell that they weren't on their side. By the time he had arrived though, he would see Megami just collapsing. In front of him was a Shikigami he had never seen before, but he could tell that this was the source of the cursed energy. They were massive in size, and Yuji's eyes would begin to flare at the sight of them. Mahoraga would turn to Yuji. Chills went down Yuji's spine as Sukuna would whisper to him, saying that this thing would kill him. At one point in life, he would have ran. That point was a long, long time ago. He had others to protect right now. He wouldn't heed Sukuna's warning and stamped forward. Mahoraga would do the same. The two would meet each other head on. Yuji's eyes would spin violently. Here, Yuji knew that this was an absolute life or death situation, and that he had the best understanding of his eyes yet. He was forcing himself to learn and adapt, pushing his eyes to evolve to the highest level. He picked up on Mahoraga's pattern quickly. The wheel would spin, meaning that adaptations were incoming. When the sword angle shifted, it meant trajectory prediction. And if he sensed cursed energy begin to spike, an incoming slash. Yuji would just narrowly dodge Mahoraga's first few strikes, but he could feel Mahoraga preparing to adapt. He would start to swing faster at Yuji. He wasn't able to dodge this time and would use a gravitational burst to throw him off center. He would witness Mahoraga's wheel begin to spin and grit his teeth. If he kept this up, he'd fully adapt to Yuji's gravitational attacks. Yuji had to figure out how to get around Mahoraga's adaptation. He was frustrated, but he wasn't about to back down. He would continue to fight against Mahoraga but get pushed back. He would try blocking some of the attacks from Mahoraga only for his defense to get broken through. He wasn't dead though, and that's all that really mattered. He would hear Sukuna talk to him with his voice clearer than ever. He would demand that Yuji use more force. The boy acted like he was weak, and that's what he hated about him. Constantly holding back, afraid of his own power. That's all he'd seen from Yuji from the moment that he woke up. Yuji would be annoyed hearing Sukuna's voice, but this time he would listen to the voice. Perhaps he had been unconsciously holding back. He'd fix it. He had to. Right when he thought he was at his limits, he would force himself to try even harder. He would move faster than he did before. His adrenaline it was kicking in overtime. He needed to get faster though. Faster. He needed to stop trying to worry about collateral damage or keeping things clean. He needed to use his full force. He opted for the more violent, chaotic route. As a result, it was necessary in his mind. He wouldn't realize it, but he would become more like the voice in his head, more like Sukuna. His voice would contort into a his face would contort into a smile as he made his legs mechanical too, in order to speed up his reflexes and begin to dodge a multitude of attacks from Mahoraga. The smile on his face wasn't that of kindness though, but cruelty. Megumi would be barely conscious here, only now waking up. He would witness quite the sight. It would be of Yuji slamming Mahoraga with one of the most devastating almighty pushes he had ever seen. This one didn't simply crack the ground beneath Mahoraga, but it completely shattered it, leaving a gaping hole. Mahoraga didn't seem to be affected though. He had already fully adapted by now. But Yuji, he didn't show any ounce of fear. Instead, he would laugh a laugh that wasn't his. He didn't want Mahoraga to die just yet. Sukuna would whisper to Yuji with glee in his voice. He wanted Yuji to become him. Hearing this, Yuji would try to snap back into reality. He would clutch his head as his eyes flickered between purple and red. He would yell aloud for Sukuna to get out of his head, but Mahoraga wouldn't wait up for Yuji. He would charge at Yuji. Yuji's eyes would immediately react. Yuji had already pushed them to their limit, and then they had to deal with Yuji, suddenly fighting his inner demon. They had no choice but to evolve once more if Yuji was expected to live here. A black ring formed around the outer edges of his eyes. It would be the outer path that awakened. Yuji would stop clutching his head and stand tall. He didn't have any chakra ranch or full resurrection yet, no. Instead, he had something else. Something to deal with Sukuna's influence for now. A form of soul anchoring came with the outer path, and he could already feel the effects of it. His eyes glowed with a new, terrifying power. Even Mahoraga could sense a difference in Yuji now, and paused for a second. Yuji would whisper something under his breath, only for Sukuna to hear. He was nobody's vessel. He would charge forward right after. Here, Yuji fought like a monster that only existed in a child's nightmares. Gravity pulses in order to mess with Mahoraga's footing. Ashura and hand strikes meant to shake the Shikigami's body, but the outer path had helped to keep Yuji alive. It stabilized his cursed energy utilization and further reinforced his durability while building a fortress against Sukuna's influence. His soul perception would be working overtime, predicting adaptation patterns. Mahoraga would adapt faster. Yuji would adapt even faster. The two of them would clash in a storm of cursed energy. Yuji would land a punch that ended up sending Mahoraga flying through a building, but Mahoraga would not stay down. Not for long at least. Yuji knew this all too well. Instead, the Divine General would rise from the rubble, and his wheel would be spinning like a hurricane. Yuji would smirk. Sukuna smirked. The two, they would charge at each other with their final blows colliding. A shockwave from the collision would be enough to tear through Shibuya. Yuji tried to hold on, but he'd be launched into the rubble in the end. He wasn't conscious but alive. Mahoraga would stagger. It was damaged, but still functional. Mahoraga would look at Yuji and pause for a moment. It would turn away from Yuji, almost as if it had just lost interest. It would take a few steps before taking a knee and collapsing to the floor. It wasn't dead or necessarily defeated either. It was pushed just as much as Yuji though. This was a first for Mahoraga. It was enough to even amuse the likes of Sukuna. Megami had witnessed everything as well, questioning where this Yuji had even come from. How did he suddenly become so strong? And the way he fought, he'd never seen Yuji fight so violently before. He was just glad that it was over though. He would fall back unconscious, unable to hold on for any longer. Whatever happened next, so be it. Yuji would wake up battered and bruised. He was bleeding all over and mentally, he was all over the place right now. Mahito would be standing over him with a gleeful look on his face. He would ask if Yuji needed some help fixing all those bruises that covered his body, but Yuji's eyes, they would just flare. The outer path stabilized his soul. He would stand up, not even feeling the immense pain that he was in right now. No more running. Those were the words that Yuji would say. Those were the only words that Yuji would actually say before he put his fist up, and so would Mahito. Yuji's soul perception would be quick to counter idle transfiguration. His Ashura path would serve to break through Mahito's guard like glass. He would keep Mahito off balance with the use of his gravity pulses. Mahito wouldn't even have the chance to corrupt Yuji's soul either. His outer path prevented such possibilities from happening. Mahito would grow desperate here. He would scream at Yuji, stating that he was supposed to break, not him. He would question why Yuji had yet to break. After this fight with Mahoraga, Yuji hardly had any rest, but he'd become stronger than ever. Fighting Mahito now, in comparison, felt like child's play. He would step forward and grab Mahito's face. He chose not to answer Mahito's question and instead slam him into the ground with a final, devastating gravitational strike. The curse's soul completely fractured. It was finally done. Mahito was nothing more than a thing of the past. Yuji would stand alone in the ruins of Shibuya. Megami was unconscious. He had no idea where Nobara was. Gojo was sealed. Mahito was dead. Mahoraga was still loose, technically. He doubted that they were down for longer than him. The worst thing of all, though, was that Sukuna had become stronger as a byproduct. Yuji would look at his hands and sigh. He was becoming a monster. Yuji would break through the fortress that the outer path had made, just barely, in order to tell Yuji that he wasn't becoming a monster. He was becoming something so much worse. He was becoming exactly like Sukuna. Yuji denied it though, simply saying that he was becoming stronger. He wasn't falling for Sukuna's tricks anymore. Choso would approach Yuji. He'd been meaning to meet Yuji for a while now. He had no animosity towards Yuji here. His brothers were still alive and well here, as well as they could be. He wanted to find out about the existence of these special eyes. These special eyes, though. Yuji would read Choso's soul and see that it was full of grief, rage, and confusion. Yuji would simply state that he was not Choso's enemy. He could tell that he was different from the curses. He didn't know what exactly was Choso though. Choso would be wondering the exact same thing about Yuji too. The two would simply look at each other before Choso departed. He had no reason to fight Yuji, but he also didn't have a reason to become his ally just yet. The connection hadn't been made yet. He was a wild card. On the other side, Kenjaku was pulling at his hairs. He was frustrated. All of his plans were falling apart. He never expected for Yuji to become as strong as he did. The Culling Games required Mahito's ideal transfiguration. He was a key part in all of this, but Yuji just had to ruin it for him. He would decide to create a new plan. He'd unseal several ancient curses and release field sorcerers from past eras. He will force modern Jujutsu society into a collapse and focus on using Yuji's Rinnegan as a core for a new evolution. You would call it the Great Purge. This wouldn't be a battle royale though, not anymore. Rather, the world was going to face waves of ancient threats released in the modern day. Each one would push Yuji closer to Sukuna in the process. That would be assuming Yuji was even alive long enough for this to happen though. The higher-ups of Jujutsu Society, hearing the news of Yuji's exploits, would find Yuji to be a greater threat than even the likes of Sukuna now. They will issue an immediate secret execution order to make certain of this execution being successful. They would send out the young Yuta Kotsu. Yuta would find Yuji by himself, exhausted and mentally fractured. Yuta would appear in front of Yuji, pulling out his sword. Yuji knew exactly what was going to happen, but he wasn't going down without a fight. Yuji would hit Yuta with a controlled almighty push, Bancho Tenyin, to redirect Yuta's sword. The other path resisted Rika's cursed energy. Yuji's usage of the Ashura path was to keep up with Yuji Yuta's speed. Yuta would use his copy technique in Rika's overwhelming force. He had a high level of his cursed energy to bring him back to optimal condition as well. His swordsmanship was to the point that Yuji could barely track it. While Yuta could easily assess that Yuji was stronger physically, he lacked the same amount of intelligence he did. He would adapt to Yuji's gravity patterns, but Yuji would eventually begin to adapt to Yuta's attacks too, predicting Yuta's sword angles. Yuji's eyes would flicker red for a second during this fight. Sukuna would use Yuji's weakened state in order to tear at the fortress the Outer Path made against him once more. He would whisper to Yuji, telling him to let him out. He would kill the black-haired boy for him. Yuji would reject Sukuna though. Every time Yuta managed to land a hit, Sukuna's voice became louder. Sukuna would roar at Yuji, telling him that he was weak. He needed to know how a king fought. Just like that, Sukuna's influence would begin to take over again. His personality would shift. Yuji's strikes became crueler, his smile sharper. His voice, it would deepen. Overall, Yuji's movements became more and more like the likes of Sukuna, and Yuta noticed this. Yuji would comment that Yuji was scaring him. All Yuji had to say though was good. That that was not Yuji. Yuta would prepare a killing blow that Yuji decided not to defend against. He wanted to be killed before Sukuna fully took over. Yuta would pause for a second though. He would talk to Rika, confirming his suspicions. They both sensed it. They sensed Sukuna, and with Sukuna came danger. I keep saying Yuji. Yuta would lower his sword, opting to knock him out instead. He wasn't going to kill Yuji. He was going to save him. The higher-ups would be furious of Yuta's decision, but Yuta showed no care. Yuji would wake up in a hospital bed and remember everything. It would flood his mind like a violent storm. He would break down only for Megami to appear, visiting his friend. He would confide in Megami, explaining that he was losing himself. Megami would simply say that they'd pull him back, and if Yuji hurt them, well, Megami would respond saying that he would hit Yuji even harder. Yuji would laugh weakly. He needed this, but he'd be lying if the thought didn't still terrify him. Megami was also traumatized from Shibuya, but he realized he needed to become someone to stand alongside Yuji whenever he was about to lose himself. Yuji would initially attempt to train alone, but Megami would stand right next to him. He would find him, as a matter of fact. The two would train together after Megami's insistence. Yuji would ask about Nobara during this time as well. He'd be relieved to see that she survived Shibuya with only a fractured arm and concussion. She had cursed energy and burnout as well, but she was alive. She'd be bedridden for weeks, but the two boys would visit her almost every day. While she was in the hospital, Yuji would continue honing in on his skills while forcing Megami to grow too. Yuji's outer path, soul anchoring, gravity precision, emotional discipline, and controlled astral path activation were what he trained. Megami focused on the 10 child's development, his domain expansion, stability, countermeasures for Sukuna ever coming back out, and mental resilience. The two would become each other's anchor here. The guilt that Megami felt, Yuji would stabilize, and Yuji's mental warfare, Megami stabilized. With the Great Purge plan Kenjaku created, he would design a ritual for unsealing these ancient curses and sorcerers. The balance between humans and curses would collapse and force evolution through chaos. It wasn't elegant, complete, or stable, but it would be enough to plunge Japan into chaos. Some of these curses he would release would be mindless beasts, while others were intelligent and hateful. Some even remembered and feared the King of Curses. As for the ancient sorcerers, well, they wouldn't reincarnate or modernize here. They would just unseal. The process wasn't complete, and some would suffer more than others as a result. Those that saw Yuji's eyes would recognize them as the eyes of the old world. He became a target and a symbol for them. Throughout Tokyo, the two would fight alongside each other. Yuji would crush ancient Yuji would crush ancient curses using his gravity bursts. Megami would trap sorcerers with his 10 shadows. The outer path Yuji used to stabilize the souls of civilians. Entire streets would be cleared by Megami. Yuji's astral path activated under pressure, and Megami's domain would flicker into existence. The two would grow together, becoming powerful. The issue was that the more Yuji fought, the more Sukuna would stir. During one of his fights against a high-level ancient curse, Yuji's Renegon would flicker red, and Sukuna would whisper for Yuji to let him have control. He wanted to show them the King of Curses was still kicking. Yuji would refuse though, and Sukuna would berate him in response, pushing for control. He would show Yuji's fighting style, becoming sharper, crueler, and more precise. Megami would recognize this and tell him to snap out of it though. Yuji would regain control for now, but even then, he knew Sukuna was getting stronger. Yuji and Megami recognized that they couldn't handle all these curses and sorcerers on their own, and they needed to gather the rest of King Gojo or whoever was in fighting condition. They would gather the likes of Yuta, Maki, after her awakening, and Hikari after butting heads with him for a while. Choso would decide to join the group as well in order to take down Kenjaku. The mission was to find Kenjaku, end the purge, and the chaos. Kenjaku would be found hiding in an abandoned shrine, guarded by ancient curses, reanimated sorcerers, and cursed worms, and a barrier fueled. Barrier fueled by stolen souls. Yuji's Renegon would see through the barrier instantly though. He would point everyone in the right direction. Yuta would take on the reanimated sorcerers, Monkey would be cutting through the ancient curses. Choso dealt with the cursed wounds. Megami would summon Max Elephant in order to break the barrier. Yuji would charge forward, straight for Kenjaku right after. Kenjaku would praise Yuji for having grown so much with a smile on his face before activating a soul-shattering technique. Sukuna would laugh witnessing this. Suddenly, instead of charging for Kenjaku, Yuji would find himself falling into his soul space. Sukuna would stand before Yuji, fully formed for the first time. He would demand Yuji let him end this, but Yuji would refuse. Yuji would state that he didn't need the King of Curses' help. Yuji would point out how he needed his help against Mahoraga though, against Yuta, and now wasn't any different. Yuji would deny this though, instead saying that he needed his friends. Sukuna would snarl hearing this. Yuji would activate his autopath inside his soul and black rings would form around him. This time it wouldn't just show in his eyes, but quite literally they would envelop him. Yuji would state that Sukuna wasn't his curse, but his responsibility. Sukuna would try to fight back, but Yuji would bind him. He didn't destroy him, but he did seal him deeper than he had ever been sealed before. Sukuna would scream as he began to fade away. Now, Yuji would stand alone in this void. For once, he had finally felt that he was at peace. He would state that, "I choose who I become." And Yuji would wake up to see Kenjaku was mid-attack. He would grab Kenjaku's arm, fighting for the ancient sorcerer's eyes to widen. Yuji's voice would be calm this time around. It wasn't cold or full of malice, and it was an eerie calm to Kenjaku because of that. All Yuji said was that he was done, and immediately after, he would crush Kenjaku's body via gravity compression and go on to seal Kenjaku's soul to using the outer path soul binding. With that, the Great Purge would collapse instantly. Ancient curses vanished, sorcerers crumbled, the barrier dissolved. It was finally over, and Yuji would collapse, with Megami coming to quickly catch him. They finally did it. Nomura would eventually return to their team. Yuta became one of Yuji's closest allies. Choso became a guardian figure. Maki would respect Yuji's strength. Higher-ups feared him, but couldn't deny that he was quintessential in saving the world. For once, Sukuna was silent. The only loss would be in the form of Gojo, but they would spend time looking into ways to free him. Eventually, they would attempt to use the absorption part of Yuji's Renegon in order to drain the energy holding the object together, breaking the seal as a result. It would take some time, but they'd be able to accomplish it. Years would pass by and Yuji would officially be recognized as the one to have surpassed Gojo. More paths would be recognized and Yuji would follow right behind Yuji, eventually taming Mahoraga as well. Gojo would retire, happy to see how strong that his students had become, and that Yuji was able to get control over his eyes especially. Nomura, Yuji, and Megami would spend some time finding out some more about the secrets behind Yuji's eyes though, just out of curiosity. But that is basically how this series kind of ends for real. Low-key, my bad for it's taking like so long. I have files and everything, and like even when I finally came back home, it's been like super noisy. I barely had any time to like record for real. So like yeah, that's all I gotta say for real. Peace.